Hey everyone, it's Pam and I'm here with my monthly update video letting you know what I've been up to and what I've been playing in the month of February. So for the first time in what feels like forever, I was a guest on a podcast. I was a guest on the Game Fellas podcast, which covers both retro and modern gaming, so it sort of really fits in with what I'm interested in. We talked about two main topics while I was on. The first was how to approach retro games in the modern day, any sort of rose-colored glasses you need to take off or things you need to remember while playing older games now. I came up with both of the topics for the episode, and that one was just based on sort of the topic that I kind of harp on a lot about just getting comments from people who, anytime I criticize anything about a retro game, chalk it up to me not understanding what games were like back then, which is completely false, but I wanted to know what everyone else thought about, any sort of understanding or things to keep in mind while playing games from the 80s or the 90s. And the second topic was similar in that it was about both modern and retro, and that was retro genres that need to make a comeback. And no genre ever really goes away, we sort of determined, but we talked about the things that were much more popular in like the 8 and 16-bit eras that don't get as much love today. So it was a really fun conversation and I'm very glad they had me on. Please go check out the Game Fellas podcast. I believe it's episode 14 that I was on. I will have a link to it in the description box below. I also have a couple more podcasts scheduled for March, which I'm very excited about, and I will let you know about those as soon as they're available. So I don't have any pickups from February. I was not buying any game-related things or even any vinyl. I should have some coming in March, hopefully. And I also don't have a shout-out for this month, so I'm going to get right into what I've been playing. So I finally wrapped up a game that I started playing almost a year ago, and that is Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice. I think I talked about it a little bit in an update, probably 10 or 11 months ago, but I finally finished the game. The only thing that really kept me from it for a long time was that you really do need to wear headphones to play this game. It gives you that information right up front, and I did find a huge difference between wearing headphones and not. And my issue was just that I don't really like wearing headphones when I play console games. I wear headphones all day on my commute to work. I wear them all day at work when I'm not in meetings. And when I come home and sit on the couch or sit in bed to play a game, I don't want to put headphones on again. But Will got me some fantastic headphones for Christmas that are comfortable and don't hurt even when I'm wearing glasses. So I finally started playing Hellblade again. And overall, I really like it. I love what Ninja Theory does. Their games that I've played so far are, the sort of cinematic action adventure games, but they're all a little bit different. They've got some sort of special twist or thing going on, and I've enjoyed them all. Hellblade has some of the best sound design I've heard in a game, and I don't know, maybe that's because it's one of the only games I play while wearing headphones, but everything sounds so good, and the voices in Senua's head are just so effective and so helpful during combat. I really, really enjoyed it, and strangely enough, I hate parry-based combat. I don't like the Dark Souls-y, deliberate, careful, punishing combat, but for some reason, Hellblade was the one place where I actually enjoyed that kind of thing. So it was a fun game. The puzzles occasionally, got a little tiresome, but overall, I had a really good time with it. I'm glad I finally put on my headphones and powered through the last few hours of it. This month, I also finished playing Suikoden, or Suikoden. I'm really gonna have to figure out how to say that. Overall, I really liked it. If you want to know more, you're going to have to wait for my review, which should hopefully come out in about a week's time. Let me know how to pronounce it so I know how when I record it. But yeah, overall really good and excited to start playing the sequel. I wanted to try out a point-and-click adventure that I've had in my Steam library for a while, so I played through Lamplight City. This came out a couple years ago, I think in 2018, but I just started it in February, and it was a great little adventure game. It was a sort of steampunk setting, detective story. You play a police detective named Miles, and at the beginning, him and his partner go to investigate a break-in, only for tragedy to strike and his partner is killed. And from then on, his partner appears as a voice in Miles's head, and you have to go around solving cases and eventually trying to solve who was responsible for your partner's murder in order to hopefully stop hearing his voice in your head. And I really, really liked this game. The art style and the conversation style really gave me Gabriel Knight vibes. It's similar in style to that, although the protagonist is much less of a dick than Gabriel Knight is, but it's got really good dialogue, really good voice acting. I like that there are sort of multiple cases that you go through. It's not all one big case, so someone who works at the police station sort of gives you these cases to go and work on. And depending on the evidence you find and the people you question, you can come to different conclusions. So you can decide one person is guilty or another person. You can say that you can't solve the case at all. And all of those things will make a difference when it comes to the ending of the game. So I really liked that because I find most point-and-click adventures are fairly linear in what you can do, so I liked that you had to solve these cases and it was possible to get it wrong. It was a really fun, really well-done point-and-click adventure game, and I would recommend it if you are into the genre. After doing my 360 collection video last month, I decided to start playing through some of the things that I had bought but not ever gotten around to playing. So I finished Tornado Outbreak, which is a cute little game. You play a tornado and you basically need to destroy things and get stronger. It's very much like Katamari Damacy in that way, in sort of just the main concept of the game. You have goals in each level, so you have to collect these things called fire flyers, and you need to keep growing and growing until you can collect all these things that you need before you can end the level. There's also a few little things, like there's a kind of race level, which is quite simple, and then each level ends in a kind of boss fight. And it was really cute. I found it outstayed its welcome a little bit. It was very simple, but overall fun and kind of a relaxing thing to do at the end of the night. Turns out I have a thing for wanton destruction in games, so I also played a game called Sea Salt. This bills itself as action strategy, though I personally have a very hard time finding a genre that it really fits into. You play an old god, basically, and at the beginning of the game, you see a priest who has been praying to this old god for power and riches. But for some reason, the old god has decided he is done supporting these people, and he's just going to destroy everything. So you play this omnipotent source leading your army of monsters and other horrors through towns and basically consuming everything in your path. I had a really good time with this. You basically have to build up an army of these horrible things. You can have swarms and maggots, you can have cats, you can have cultists which are range DPS, you can have lizard men, and they basically just cause terror and fear and kill all the humans in the area. At the end of each level, there's a bit of a boss fight, and it's very interesting. It's just, you just have this swarm of monsters you're controlling, and some villagers will fight back, so you need to know when to attack, when to draw back, and you need to just build this army and decide what unit to sort of recruit every time you get a certain number of points or come across a summoning stone, and I really liked it. It was actually pretty tough at times, but it was enjoyable. It has really nice pixel art, and it wasn't too long, just a few hours long, although there's some other game modes like arenas and things you can do for an extra challenge, but it was very interesting and like nothing that I've really ever played before. So I guess it's sort of like a real-time strategy, but much looser implementation than what I'm used to. So Sea Salt, recommend that if you're looking for something a little different. In February, the final act of Kentucky Route Zero finally came out, I think 7 years after Act 1. I bought this game years ago, but I never started to play it because I don't like playing unfinished games, and I wanted the whole thing to be available when I finally started. And I have to say, I wish I had started earlier so that I could temper my expectations a bit, because it did absolutely nothing for me. The game is about a delivery driver making his final delivery and his adventures along the Kentucky Route Zero, the people he meets along the way. It is very surreal, it's very much a magical realism game, and it is in the format of basically a point-and-click adventure. When I started Act 1, I was trying my best to get into it. There was some cool things. It did some neat things with light and dark as you travel, and some cool things with perspective and how the sort of camera moves as you went through certain scenes. But overall, I just found it incredibly dull. Every once in a while, something sort of interesting and surreal and surprising would happen, which was cool, but between those moments, it just really wasn't clicking with me. I know it does go into sort of systemic poverty and how it sucks to not have healthcare, and there's a lot of commentary on that, which is good. I think that's something games should be talking about, but the package, like, I don't understand why it needed to be a point-and-click adventure game. I feel like it would have been better in other mediums, an art installation, a visual novel, like a short film, I don't know. Just the interaction I had with the game made me like it less than I might have otherwise. Just the slow walking, the having to like pan the camera around to push dialogue forward. None of it did anything for me, and I just found it all incredibly dull. I found out after talking to some people about it that somehow I managed to skip the entire third act of the game, which is strange. I don't know why you wouldn't just play the game in order automatically, but somehow I did that, and at that point I was already most of the way through Act 4, and I realized I didn't care enough to go backwards, and I also didn't care enough to go forwards. The last scene I saw was 2 dogs sleeping without any dialogue at all, and I figured this is probably the high point of the game for me, so I called it quits on Kentucky Route Zero. I've been listening to podcasts and reading articles about it to sort of try to figure out what I'm missing here, but the game just doesn't work for me. I found it incredibly boring, and that's it. And lastly, I finished Jedi Fallen Order. I know I talked about this last month, and I said I didn't think I'd have anything more to say, but I need to sort of walk back a few things. Last month I mentioned that the game was very okay. Like, it was derivative and just sort of not as good as the games that it was being derivative of. But I did find that after a while, like after 8 or 10 hours, which I have to say, like, it shouldn't take a game 8 or 10 hours to get good, but there were parts that were, like, there were some really, really high parts for me. I found that when the game had less combat and more of the sort of action-adventure platforming kind of stuff, it was much more enjoyable for me. I did also end up turning the combat difficulty way down, since I did just hate the combat and it ruined the good things for me, so turning that down let me enjoy the rest of the game. Some planets are a lot of fun, like Kashyyyk. The second time you go there, you're sort of climbing this world tree. I don't think that's what it's called. Maybe it's called that. You're climbing this tree, and it's a lot of fun, and there's barely any combat, and I really liked it. It was more about, like, cool platforming and, like, sliding down hills and force pulling vines and swinging on them, and that was a lot of fun. And then another planet called Dathomir was bad. And another planet, Zepho. Zepho was a terrible planet and probably the source of most of my frustrations that weren't combat related in the game. I found Zepho just impossible to navigate. The map was of no use to me at all. Yeah, so it was very, very full of highs and lows. Like, 2 of the 4 planets were a joy to explore, I found, and 2 of the 4 planets were confusing and convoluted and full of way too much combat that I didn't enjoy. But overall, it was good. I did end up enjoying it more than I thought I would, and I also really liked the characters. The main guy, a little on the dull side, but the side characters who you end up getting, I really ended up liking all of those characters. So I'm glad that I continued and played through it, and my opinions on Jedi Fallen Order are a little bit more positive than they were last month. Alright, so that's it for me. That was everything I was up to in February. Let me know in the comments what you were playing, if you had any interesting pickups. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.